The rain hammered against the corrugated metal roof like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. Diane Reynolds stood in the doorway, her worn leather boots soaked through, clutching the brass key that had arrived with the lawyer's letter 3 days ago. "There are treasures hidden in the most unlikely places," her grandmother used to say. Now, at 58, Diane wished Eleanor were still alive to see what her estranged husband had left behind. The abandoned textile factory loomed before her in the gray morning light, broken windows, rust-stained walls, weeds growing through cracks in the loading dock. This was her inheritance. This was what her grandfather, a man she'd never met, had left her after 40 years of silence. "Some gift," she muttered, pushing wet silver-streaked hair from her eyes. The lawyer had been blunt. Property taxes alone would bury her. The building was contaminated with asbestos. Demolition costs would exceed any possible sale value. He'd actually suggested she refuse the inheritance, save herself the headache. But Diane didn't have the luxury of walking away from anything anymore. Not with her daughter Kate struggling to raise 8-year-old Noah while working full-time and attending night classes. Not with the eviction notice that gave them exactly 11 days to find somewhere else to live. Not with the mountain of medical bills that had piled up after her heart attack last year. The key turned easier than it should have in the rusted lock. The heavy door groaned open, revealing a cavern of shadows and abandoned machinery. The air inside was thick with dust and something else, a strange, preserved quality, like opening a time capsule. Diane's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating rows of ancient textile machines, their metal bones draped in cobwebs. She moved deeper into the space, her footsteps echoing. The beam of light caught a framed photograph on the wall of what must have been her grandfather's office. She wiped away decades of dust with her sleeve. Her breath caught. There was her grandmother, Eleanor, young, radiant, laughing, wrapped in the arms of a handsome man with kind eyes and a serious mouth. On the back, written in faded ink, "Eleanor, the true love of my life. They will never understand what we had to sacrifice." Sacrifice? The family story was that Harold Reynolds had abandoned his wife and daughter, that Eleanor had cut all ties with him. Nothing about sacrifice or true love. Nothing about the tenderness evident in that photograph. Her phone buzzed a text from Kate. "Mom, landlord came by again. Friday now, not next week." Diane's stomach clenched. Friday, 5 days to pack their entire life. She typed back, "Don't worry, baby, I'm handling it." But she wasn't handling anything. She was drowning. Had been drowning ever since Robert died 5 years ago. Taking his pension and their shared dreams with him. The factory floor stretched before her, easily the size of a football field. There had to be something here worth salvaging. Copper pipes, maybe, or machinery that could be sold for scrap. Anything to buy them a few more days. That's when she noticed the floor in the center of the main production area. Barely visible beneath decades of grime was a square section of concrete that looked different, newer. The seams were too precise, too deliberate. Diane knelt down, brushing away dirt with her sleeve. There were marks along the edge, letters carved deep into the concrete. HR DR 1983. Harold Reynolds. Diane Reynolds. The year he disappeared. Diane's heart raced. She ran her fingers along the seam, feeling for any opening. Nothing, just smooth, cold concrete that had been expertly sealed. She needed tools. 20 minutes later, she was back with a crowbar and hammer from her car. The sound rang through the empty factory like a bell as she struck. On the third strike, the concrete cracked. On the 10th, a chunk broke away, revealing not more concrete beneath, but metal. A metal door, precisely fitted into the floor. Diane's hands trembled as she cleared away debris. The door was about 4 feet square with a simple handle recessed into its surface. No lock, just a handle waiting to be pulled. She gripped it tight, took a deep breath, and lifted. The door was heavy but well balanced, rising on hidden hinges to reveal a ladder descending into darkness. Cool air rushed up from below, carrying a scent of metal and paper. Lots of paper. Diane aimed her flashlight down. The ladder went down maybe 12 feet, Against every instinct, screaming at her to leave, to call someone, she swung her legs over the edge and started climbing down. The room was concrete on all sides, maybe 10 by 10 feet. But it wasn't the room itself that made her legs go weak. It was what filled the room. Stacks upon stacks of sealed plastic containers, clear enough to see inside. Money, bundled bills wrapped in old-style paper bands, hundreds, 50s, 20s, row after row, stack after stack. Diane sank to her knees, mind struggling to process what she was seeing. She reached for the nearest container with shaking hands, popping the airtight seal. The bills inside looked fresh, crisp, like they'd been printed yesterday, despite the dates all from the early 1982 or before. A manila envelope was taped to the inside lid. Diane opened it with trembling fingers, pulling out a single sheet of paper covered in unfamiliar handwriting. My dear Diane, if you're reading this, then the lawyers finally found you, and you found what I left behind. I know your mother kept you from me. I don't blame her. By the end, I wasn't myself anymore. The pressure, the threats, the betrayals, they changed me. This money is clean, earned through decades of honest work before everything went wrong. When I realized they were going to destroy me, frame me, take everything I'd built, I converted what I could to cash and hid it here. They searched the factory 100 times, but never found this room. $240 million. I counted it twice. It's yours now. But be careful. Be smart. The same people who destroyed me might still be watching. Don't let them know what you've found. Take it slow. I'm sorry I never got to know you. I'm sorry for whatever struggles you faced. Let this make it right. All my love, Harold Reynolds. P.S. The factory has good bones. Don't sell it. Don't let them tear it down. This building isn't just walls and machines. It's the heart of Millfield. Help it beat again. I wonder where you're listening to this story right now. Perhaps in your favorite chair, or maybe while driving. Wherever you are, relax and let me continue telling you how Diane's fate was about to change forever. That night, Diane sat alone at her kitchen table, reading her grandfather's letter for the dozenth time. Around her, the small apartment she'd called home for 15 years felt suddenly temporary. Its familiar comforts, the collection of vintage teacups lining the shelves, the family photos covering the refrigerator, the armchair where Robert used to read, all of it boxed in shadow and uncertainty. She held the photograph she'd taken from the factory, Eleanor and Harold, young and in love, and tried to reconcile this image with the villain of family lore. A man who had supposedly abandoned his family. A man who had, apparently, been hiding a fortune meant for her all along. Her eyes drifted to Noah's school picture on the refrigerator, his missing front teeth creating a gap-toothed grin that always made her smile. Do we ever really know people? She whispered to the empty room, or just the stories told about them. Over the next few days, Diane moved cautiously. She extracted just enough cash to pay off their eviction notice and put a deposit on a modest 3-bedroom house in a safer neighborhood. When Kate questioned the sudden windfall, Diane claimed she'd sold some antique machinery from the factory to a museum collector. I've been exploring options, honey. Things are going to get better now. Kate, exhausted from her nursing classes and single motherhood, accepted the explanation with relief. Noah was simply excited about having his own room for the first time. 1 week after moving day, the doorbell rang. Diane opened the door to find an elderly woman with silver hair twisted into an elegant bun, sharp blue eyes, and an intricately carved wooden cane. The woman studied Diane's face with unsettling intensity. "Diane Reynolds," she said. "Not a question, but a confirmation. I'm Margaret Harrison. Harold was my brother." Diane's knees nearly buckled. "I didn't know he had a sister." "He had two. May I come in?" They sat in the living room, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes. Margaret's gaze swept over everything, missing nothing. "You found it," Margaret said without preamble. "The money." Diane's teacup rattled against its saucer. "How did you—" "Because I helped him hide it. I was an engineer. Harold trusted me with everything except where he went when he disappeared." Pain flickered across Margaret's face. He left all of us. Said it was safer. The men who wanted to destroy him weren't above using family as leverage. Who were they? Margaret's voice dropped. Your grandfather built his fortune honestly, but he refused to play the games others expected. Wouldn't bribe officials, wouldn't look away when competitors cut corners on safety. He had evidence of their corruption documents that could have sent half the town's business elite to prison. What happened to the evidence? Some say he destroyed it, others think he hid it. But after 40 years, most of those men are dead. Their sons run the town now, but they've continued their father's practices. Margaret reached into her large handbag and pulled out a bundle of yellowed envelopes tied with faded blue ribbon. These are letters between Harold and your grandmother. Diane's hands trembled as she accepted them. My grandmother hated him. She forbade us from even mentioning his name. Margaret's mouth twisted into a sad smile. That's what she wanted people to believe. It protected you all. Read them. You'll understand. Later that night, after Kate and Noah had gone to bed, Diane opened the first letter. What she discovered shattered everything she thought she knew about her family. Harold and Eleanor had never stopped loving each other. The estrangement had been a careful performance designed to keep Eleanor and their daughter safe from Harold's enemies. The final letter, sent just before Harold's disappearance, spoke of a Millfield revival plan, a vision for the town with thriving small businesses, green spaces, and a strong community. Someday, Harold had written, when it's safe, I'll return. We'll rebuild Millfield together, the way it should be. A place where people don't just work and survive, they thrive. The next morning, Margaret returned with her nephew, Thomas Harrison, a financial attorney in his early 50s, with cautious eyes and a warm smile that reminded Diane of the man in the photograph. Over the following weeks, Thomas helped Diane establish trusts and shell companies to slowly access the money without triggering investigations. Think of it like water through pipes, he explained. Too much pressure and the pipe bursts. Multiple channels, controlled flow. That's how we do this safely. During their work together, Diane found herself drawn to Thomas's steady presence and quiet humor. There was an easiness between them, though both carried the caution of people who had loved and lost before. In Harold's office at the factory, Diane discovered a hidden safe behind a portrait. Inside were detailed blueprints, not just for the factory, but for what it could become. Plans for a community hub with manufacturing space, education centers, childcare, even affordable housing units. He wanted to do more than make textiles, Diane told Margaret over coffee in the newly cleaned factory office. He envisioned a whole community. Margaret nodded. That's why they destroyed him. He was proving you could profit and treat workers fairly, made the others look bad. Diane spread the blueprints out on the dusty desk. What if we could still do it? Adapt it for today? With what money? Margaret asked with a knowing smile. Diane met her eyes. We both know there's enough. The question is whether it's right. That night, Diane visited the local cemetery, sitting beside Robert's grave as the sunset painted the marble headstones in gold and pink. I wish you were here to help me decide, she whispered. We could secure our future Kates and Noahs for generations. Or we could try to save this town that's been dying for 40 years. She traced the letters of his name. What would you do? The wind rustled through the oak trees overhead, and Diane smiled, remembering how Robert always said community was the only true security. I think I know what she'd say. Have you ever discovered that the family story you knew wasn't the whole truth? Family secrets are often more complex than they appear. I'd love to hear about your experience in the comments. Now, let's see what Diane will do with this treasure and family secret. Over the next month, Diane carefully extracted more money from the underground room, always at night, always in small amounts. She began quietly purchasing abandoned lots around the factory through various shell companies Thomas had established. Kate became an unexpected ally when Diane finally shared the truth with her. After the initial shock and disbelief, her daughter embraced the vision of rebuilding Millfield. Dad would be so proud of you, Mom, Kate said, tears in her eyes. He always said you had a heart bigger than this whole town. Noah, with a child's enthusiasm, spent hours drawing pictures of what the new factory might look like, complete with playgrounds and an ice cream shop on the corner. But as word spread about renovation plans for the old Reynolds factory, obstacles began to appear with suspicious frequency. The Planning Commission, headed by James Blackwell, son of Harold's chief rival, rejected their initial proposals on technicalities. Inspectors appeared with citations for violations that hadn't existed the day before. Contractors would agree to work, then suddenly back out after receiving other offers. Thomas helped navigate the legal challenges, while Margaret used her connections among the town's older residents to build grassroots support. But the opposition was powerful and entrenched. "They're scared," Thomas explained one evening as they reviewed their latest setback. "People like the Blackwells have controlled this town's decline because it benefits them. Empty buildings mean cheap real estate. Desperate workers accept lower wages." "So we fight harder," Diane said, her grandmother's determination flooding through her veins. The turning point came during a routine inspection of recent vandalism at the construction site. Diane discovered a hidden drawer in Harold's desk containing old surveillance photographs, images of James Blackwell and associates meeting with uniformed police officers in the early 1980 seconds. Written on the back, "Evidence of corruption in Millfield Police Department, 1983. Diane realized these were part of the evidence that had forced Harold to flee, and these photographs might still be dangerous or useful. When confronted with the full truth about her activities, Kate's initial anger at being kept in the dark quickly transformed to understanding. "I get it now," she said, embracing her mother. "This isn't just about money or buildings. It's about setting something right." That same week, Diane received an unexpected call from William Blackwell, James's son, and the local bank manager. He requested a private meeting at the factory. William, 36 and nothing like his father, arrived looking nervous but determined. "I found documents in my father's safe," he said without preamble. "Records of what they did to your grandfather, plans they're making to block your development." He met Diane's suspicious gaze directly. "I'm not my father, Miss Reynolds. I want to help fix what my family broke." The confrontation came during a public planning commission meeting. James Blackwell stood at the podium, listing reasons why Diane's Reynolds Community Revitalization Project should be denied permits. His silver hair and expensive suit couldn't disguise the meanness around his mouth as he questioned Diane's experience and resources. When it was her turn to speak, Diane approached the microphone with quiet dignity. Thomas and Margaret sat in the front row, while Kate and Noah watched from seats near the back. She could feel the weight of Harold's and Eleanor's letters in her pocket. 40 years ago, Diane began, Millfield was a place where people could build a good life, where factory workers owned homes, where Main Street thrived, where neighbors looked out for each other. Her voice strengthened. That Millfield didn't die naturally. It was systematically dismantled by people who valued profit over community. She outlined her vision for a new Millfield jobs that paid living wages, affordable housing, green spaces, small business incubators. "This isn't charity," she emphasized. "It's investment in people, in possibility." She ended by revealing her identity. "My name is Diane Reynolds. Harold Reynolds was my grandfather. I'm here to complete the work he started before he was driven away. Not out of revenge, but because his vision for this town was right then, and it's right now." James Blackwell's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "The Reynolds factory is an environmental hazard that should be demolished. Miss Reynolds clearly lacks the resources or expertise for a project of this magnitude. I move that we— Actually, Father, I'd like to speak." The room fell silent as William Blackwell rose from his seat. James stared at his son in disbelief. "For years," William said, his voice steady despite his obvious nerves, "I've watched this town decline while certain families prospered from its failure. I've seen development proposals mysteriously denied until property values dropped enough for these same families to purchase them cheaply." He approached the commission table, placing a folder before them. These are records of systematic corruption spanning 4 decades, beginning with the destruction of Harold Reynolds and continuing to the present day. He turned to face his father. "It ends now." The meeting dissolved into chaos. James stormed out, but the damage was done. 3 weeks later, the Planning Commission, minus James Blackwell, who had abruptly resigned, approved Diane's proposal unanimously. Sometimes heroes come from the most unexpected places, don't they? Has someone ever stood up for you when you least expected it? Keep watching to see how Diane and her allies faced the aftermath of this confrontation. James Blackwell didn't surrender quietly. He used his connections to freeze Diane's business accounts, halting construction. Anonymous threats appeared at the factory. During a severe thunderstorm, someone broke in, damaging equipment and leaving a menacing message painted on the wall. Reynolds ruins everything. Diane nearly gave up until Noah handed her a new drawing, the factory surrounded by dozens of stick figures holding hands. "Grandma, we can fix it, right? Great-grandpa wants us to." The next morning, something remarkable happened. People began appearing at the factory, former textile workers, local shop owners, teachers, teenagers. They brought tools, food, and stories. "My father worked here for 30 years, an elderly man told Diane. "It's time Millfield stood up again." The community rallied. Volunteers helped repair the vandalism. Local businesses donated materials. A retired contractor offered his services free of charge. What James Blackwell had intended as a setback became a catalyst for community engagement. During the cleanup, Diane discovered another hidden compartment behind a wall panel in Harold's office. Inside were meticulously documented files, not just about corruption 40 years ago, but ongoing activities involving James Blackwell, including money laundering and bribery. Harold had apparently maintained a network of informants, gathering information for years, even after he disappeared. Rather than using the evidence for revenge, Diane confronted James privately, with William and Thomas present as witnesses. She proposed a deal. James would cease all opposition to the project, make a substantial contribution to the Reynolds Community Development Fund, and, in return, the documents would remain sealed. "I'm not interested in destroying you, James. I just want to rebuild this town." Faced with irrefutable evidence that could send him to prison, James reluctantly agreed. But the meeting profoundly affected William, who finally understood the full extent of his father's crimes. In a private moment afterward, he apologized to Diane on behalf of his family. "The Blackwells and Reynolds may never be friends," he said, "but perhaps we can end the war." 1 year after finding the money, the first phase of the project opened a business incubator offering affordable space to local entrepreneurs. During renovations, workers discovered a mural hidden behind old insulation on the eastern wall, the factory in its heyday, workers standing together, sun rising behind them. At the bottom, in Harold's handwriting, "Built by many hands, stronger together." On opening day, Diane stood before the crowd, Kate and Noah beside her, Thomas holding her hand. She told the story of Harold and Eleanor, of a love forced into hiding, and of a vision that waited 40 years to be realized. "This town was built by people like my grandparents, people who dared to dream of a community where everyone had a chance to thrive. Today, we begin making that dream real again." After the ceremony, an elderly man approached Diane, introducing himself as Robert Jenkins, Harold's former assistant. He handed her a small wooden box. "Harold gave me this before he vanished, told me to keep it until the factory lived again." Inside was Eleanor's wedding ring, with a message, "For Diane, the woman who will finish what we started. Love is the greatest legacy." 5 years later, the Textile Row had transformed from abandoned buildings to a vibrant community with community gardens, affordable housing, an art center, and a farmer's market. Diane and Thomas had married in a small ceremony in the rooftop garden of the factory. Kate had graduated business school and now ran the small business support program. Noah, now 13, led tours for visitors about the Millfield miracle. On a quiet afternoon, Diane sat on a bench in the community garden, looking down at the revitalized town. Thomas joined her, placing his hand on her shoulder. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked. Diane smiled, touching Eleanor's wedding ring that hung on a chain around her neck. "I was just thinking that the real treasure wasn't the money," she said. "It was the chance to complete something bigger than myself." Together, they watched the sunset behind the reborn buildings. Warm, golden light reflecting on the new sign. Millfield, built by many hands, stronger together. Sometimes, the greatest treasures aren't what we find, but what we create. Have you ever realized that the past left you not just memories, but opportunities to build something meaningful? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about revival, love, and second chances.